Transport of carbon dioxide. The learning objectives will be to study the methods of transport of carbon dioxide, to know about Haldane's effect, chloride shift and reverse chloride shift, and to understand the carbon dioxide dissociation curve and various factors which affect it. The transport of carbon dioxide from the tissue cells to the lung occur in three-step process. The first step being production of carbon dioxide in the cell, and then diffusion of this carbon dioxide from the cell into the blood vessel. The second step is the transport of carbon dioxide in the blood, and the third step is diffusion of carbon dioxide from the blood vessel into the alveoli, and then it is exhaled out. So release of carbon dioxide occurs in the lung. So these are the three steps of carbon dioxide transport. Carbon dioxide, we know, is an end product of metabolism mainly produced by the mitochondria, and it is produced at a rate of 200 ml per minute. During exercise or any strenuous activity, the amount of carbon dioxide production may increase up to 6 times. So we start with the transport of carbon dioxide, and the first step in the transport of carbon dioxide is diffusion of carbon dioxide into the blood. So we know that tissue cells constantly produce carbon dioxide by the various metabolic processes that are occurring in the cell, and as you can see here, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the cell is 46 millimeters of mercury. So this carbon dioxide which is produced in the cell will then diffuse into the interstitial spaces, and it will diffuse against a pressure gradient of 1 millimeters of mercury. As you can see here, the interstitial fluid has a partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is 45 mm, and this is so because of the rapid diffusion of carbon dioxide out of the cell into the interstitial fluid. Next, when the carbon dioxide is present in the interstitial fluid, it will then diffuse into the arterial end of the capillary, where the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 millimeters of the mercury. Soon this blood will be flowing from the arterial end of the capillary into the venous end, and it will attain an equilibrium with the interstitial fluid, and then carbon dioxide will be carried into the systemic venous system. Once the carbon dioxide reaches the blood, it is transported in the blood in three forms. The first form is the dissolved form, which comprises a small portion of carbon dioxide in the dissolved state, and it is carried in this form to the lung. The second form exists in a chemical combination with the hemoglobin in the form of carb-amino hemoglobin, and the third or the major form of transport of carbon dioxide is in the form of bicarbonate ion. We know that carbon dioxide exists in a gaseous form, and it is 20 times more soluble than oxygen, and it obeys the Henry law, where the concentration of carbon dioxide in a solution can be given by product of partial pressure of carbon dioxide and the solubility coefficient. The solubility coefficient for carbon dioxide is 0.69 ml per liter per millimeters of mercury. Therefore, the concentration of carbon dioxide depends upon the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. The more the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, more will be the concentration of carbon dioxide in the solution. As we can see here, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide increases the concentration of carbon dioxide in the solution. On entering the blood, some of the carbon dioxide combines with the amine group of the protein to form carb-amino compound. So when this combination occurs with the amine group of the hemoglobin, we get carb-amino hemoglobin, and a small amount of carbon dioxide also react in the same way with the plasma protein to form carb-amino protein. However, the amount of plasma protein is just 1/4 as great as quantity of hemoglobin. So the major form that is formed is the carb-amino hemoglobin. This reaction is a reversible reaction that occurs with a loose bond, so that carbon dioxide is easily released into the alveoli when the PCO2 is lower than that of the pulmonary capillary. And also this reaction is slower reaction. It is so, because of this reaction, it is so slow that it is doubtful that under the normal condition this mechanism contributes even less than 20% of the total carbon dioxide transport. And the amount of carbon dioxide that is bound as carbamate to hemoglobin or plasma protein, it depends upon two factors. One is the oxygen saturation. Greater the oxygen saturation, lesser will be the amount that is bound to the carbon dioxide, and also it depends upon the hydrogen ion concentration. The major mechanism for transport of carbon dioxide is in the form of bicarbonate. So let's understand this mechanism. First, we know that this is a cell, tissue cell, which is present in the interstitial fluid, and this is an RBC which is present in a blood. So we have a presence of this enzyme which is known by the name of carbonic anhydrase. This enzyme accelerates the reaction between carbon dioxide and water approximately 5000 fold. So whenever carbon dioxide is produced in the tissue cell by the end metabolism, it diffuses to the RBC cell and forms along with the combination of water, it forms the bicarbonic acid within fraction of second, and then within another fraction of second this carbonic acid formed in the RBC dissociate into hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. The hydrogen ion that is formed combines with the hemoglobin, whereas bicarbonate ion diffuses out of the RBC into the plasma. So you can see here it has diffused out, whereas the hydrogen ion combines with hemoglobin protein in a powerful acid-base buffer reaction. Then this carbon dioxide which is present here also form combination with the hemoglobin to form carb-amino hemoglobin, which contribute 23% of the transport mechanism. So the question remains, with the movement of bicarbonate from the RBC into the cell exterior or the plasma causes the change in electroneutrality. Now, how is the electroneutrality of the cell maintained? We know that red cell membrane does not allow the transport of cation. So there is a net movement of a chloride ion inside to the cell with the help of a special exchanger, that is bicarbonate chloride exchanger or anion exchanger, to maintain the electroneutrality of the cell, and this phenomena is known by the name of chloride shift. So at the end we have this bicarbonate form which is present in the plasma at the level of the tissues, which is transported, contributes approximately 70% of the transport of carbon dioxide. Chloride shift is also known by the name of Hamburger's phenomena. It maintains the electroneutrality of the cell. So increased carbon dioxide produced by metabolism from the tissue cell then diffuses into the plasma and RBC. Inside the RBC it goes under various chemical reactions to form carbonic acid and then hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. The slow buildup of bicarbonate ion is there, as you can see here. The bicarbonate then diffuses out of the RBC into the plasma, causing the inside of the cell to become less negative. And now we know that RBC membrane is relatively impermeable to cation. So what will happen now? Chloride, as you can see, starts to move inside the cell, that is, it replaces the bicarbonate in the RBC cell. This movement of chloride into the RBC is known by the name of chloride shift. It is mediated by band 3 or major anion ion exchange membrane protein, also known by the name of anion exchanger. So this chloride shift is very rapid and it is essentially completed within 1 second. So here you can see two types of RBC cell. One cell is lying at the level of peripheral capillaries and the another cell is present in the pulmonary capillary. So we start with this cell which is present in the peripheral capillaries. We know that increased metabolism in the tissue leads to the production of carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide diffuses into the RBC. Here it is converted by a series of chemical reaction into bicarbonate ion that we have already studied in the presence of carbonic anhydrase. This bicarbonate ion then diffuses out of RBC into the plasma in exchange of chloride ion, which moves from the plasma inside the cell with the help of this anion exchanger. This phenomena is known by the name of chloride shift. So what happens in the pulmonary capillary? Here we see that bicarbonate, which is present outside in the plasma, diffuses into the RBC. It goes series of chemical reaction to form carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide is then exchanged through the respiratory membrane of the alveoli to the outside. And instead, in the exchange of movement of bicarbonate from the plasma into the RBC, we have this movement of chloride from the cell interior, that is RBC, to the plasma. So this phenomena is known by the name of reverse chloride shift. So we have two type of movement. One is chloride shift, which is occurring in the peripheral capillaries, and another is the reverse chloride shift. So it is not only chloride which will be changed during this phenomena. There are certain ions which also will be, composition of ions will be changed in the venous and the arterial blood. So what are these changes? Because of the movement of chloride into the RBC, there is also an increase in the number of ions inside the RBC. So the osmotic pressure inside the RBC becomes higher than that of the plasma. This causes the osmotic absorption of fluid into the RBC. Here you can see the venous blood and the arterial blood. The venous blood in the plasma has less number of chloride as compared to the arterial blood. Why? Because chloride has moved inside the RBC by the phenomena of chloride shift, and bicarbonate you can see have increased. So there is exchange of bicarbonate for the chloride, and chloride has moved into the RBC, causing the increased number of ions, increased osmolarity, and increase in cell size. The mean corpuscular volume or the packed cell volume is slightly higher than that of the level of tissue arterial blood. It is 3% higher, and venous blood RBC are more fragile as compared to the arterial blood moves into the. So these are the changes that occur, and reverse chloride shift in the venous blood because of this chloride shift phenomenon. The bicarbonate moves into the RBC, and the chloride ions move out of the RBC into the plasma. The final step in the transport of carbon dioxide is the release of carbon dioxide at the level of lung. Here in this diagram you can see that at the level of alveolus, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40 mm of mercury, and in the blood the carbon dioxide is transported in the three forms: as dissolved form, bicarbonate form, and the carbamino form. It reaches the level of alveoli, and here the partial pressure you can see is 45 mm of mercury. So with the pressure gradient of 5 mm of mercury, it causes the diffusion of carbon dioxide from the pulmonary capillary into the alveolus, from where it is exhaled. So you can see here there is diffusion of carbon dioxide and the release of carbon dioxide into the lungs. At the level of pulmonary capillaries, there is increased concentration of oxygen, and this oxygen diffuses into the capillary blood, and it results in the oxygenation of the deoxyhemoglobin, which is a stronger acid. The oxygen hemoglobin so formed is a stronger acid. This oxyhemoglobin has a reduced tendency to bind with the hydrogen ion, as you can see here, as a result of which hydrogen ion will be released into the RBC. There will be accumulation of hydrogen ion and it needs to be neutralized. It will be neutralized by the bicarbonate, which then diffuses from the plasma into the cell interior. This bicarbonate and hydrogen ion react together to form carbonic acid, which then dissociates to form water and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide so formed will be released into the plasma against a pressure gradient of 5 mm of mercury. Now secondly, with the movement of this bicarbonate ion inside the RBC, the cell becomes more negative. In order to neutralize it, the charged cation should move inside, but as we know, the RBC membrane is impermeable to cations, so it results in the movement of chloride which is present here in the RBC. It moves out, and this phenomena is known by the name of reverse chloride shift. So this is a diffusion of carbon dioxide from the RBC into the is a graph that is plotted between the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in millimeters of mercury represented along x-axis, and along the y-axis we have the carbon dioxide content in the blood, which is ranging from 0 to 80. Now, as you can see, the normal operating range of carbon dioxide is a very narrow range, that is 40 to 45 millimeters of mercury. This is in contrast to the PO2 level in oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve that was from 40 to 100 millimeters of mercury. So at partial pressure of 45 millimeter, we can see that the carbon dioxide content in the blood is 52 ml per 100 ml of the blood. And at a partial pressure of 40 millimeters, the carbon dioxide content is 48 ml per 100 ml of the blood. Now you see this graph which is present. Here you can see the graph has been plotted for partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and here on the y-axis you have the content of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So you can compare two type of graph here. One is the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, and second is the carbon dioxide dissociation curve. So what do you observe when you compare both of these graphs? First is the shape of the graph. Among the shape, you can see the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is a sigmoid shape curve, meaning that it has a steep portion and the flat portion. And the carbon dioxide dissociation curve, here you can see, is more so a linear type of graph that represents an increase in carbon dioxide content with an increase in partial pressure. Okay, and one thing that you must notice in this graph is that the physiological range of partial pressure of carbon dioxide is between 40 to 45. So we have extrapolated this graph, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Therefore it is more so a experimental or theoretical phenomena and not a physiological phenomena, because it operates in a range of 40 to 45 only. As we have said, we can see the rise of carbon dioxide throughout with the increase in the partial pressure, and in oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve we already know that it has two parts, the steep portion and the flat portion. In the flat portion, the oxyhemoglobin has become saturated, and therefore there is a flat or the plateau phase which is seen in this. There are three important factors which affect the carbon dioxide dissociation curve. First is oxygen, second is 2,3-DPG level, and third is the body temperature. So oxygen, we know that carbon dioxide has more affinity for the deoxyhemoglobin present in the tissue capillaries. Therefore it is capable of loading more carbon dioxide compared to the oxyhemoglobin. And we also know that oxygenation of hemoglobin in the lung causes the carbon dioxide unloading, which is also known by the name of Haldane's effect. Coming to 2,3-DPG, we know that 2,3-DPG competes with the carbon dioxide for the same sites on hemoglobin. Therefore 2,3-DPG will shift the carbon dioxide dissociation curve to the right, meaning that carbon dioxide carrying capacity will be decreased. And third effect is by the temperature, and this causes the left shift of the carbon dioxide dissociation curve. So let's understand this Haldane effect with the help of this graph. In this graph we have the carbon dioxide dissociation curve which are plotted for three values of partial pressure of oxygen. One is 100, the second curve is for partial pressure of oxygen being 10, and third is for partial pressure of oxygen, that is 0. We know that the carb amino hemoglobin is much affected by the state of oxygenation of hemoglobin, less so by the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, meaning thereby that lower the saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, larger is the carbon dioxide concentration at a given PaCO2. As we can see here, at a partial pressure of oxygen, that is 0, the carbon dioxide content in the blood is more as compared with the partial pressure of oxygen, that is 100. The carbon dioxide content in the blood is less. So with the lowering of the saturation of the oxygen, more carbon dioxide is binding with the hemoglobin to form carb-amino form. This curve is shifted to the right by increase in SpO2. We can see at the level of 0, then shifting to the right at the level of 10, then further shifting to the right at the level of 100. And if you remember, we have this Bohr effect that refers to the increased carbon dioxide in the blood causing displacement of oxygen from the hemoglobin and causing the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve to shift to the right. So Haldane effect is an effect that is reverse of this. That means increased oxygen binding with the hemoglobin will cause the displacement of carbon dioxide from the blood. This Haldane effect is far more important than promoting carbon dioxide transport than in the Bohr effect. So let's understand the significance of the Haldane's effect. Haldane effect, we can see this graph which shows the two values. At partial pressure of oxygen of 100 millimeters, we have this solid type of carbon dioxide dissociation curve, and another is a dashed line which represent the carbon dioxide dissociation curve at the level of partial pressure of oxygen, that is 40 millimeters of the mercury. So we have two types of carbon dioxide dissociation curve. One at the partial pressure of oxygen of 100 millimeters, which is found in pulmonary capillaries at the level of lung, and second at a partial pressure of oxygen of 40 millimeters of mercury, which is present at the level of tissue capillaries. So first we come to this point, that is point A. Point A shows that a partial pressure of carbon dioxide at 45 millimeters, which is present in the tissue, the carbon dioxide content in the blood is approximately 52%. Okay. Next we come to point B. This is the partial pressure at the partial pressure of 40 millimeters of mercury. When the blood is returning to the lung, the carbon dioxide partial pressure is 40. So at point B, which is at the level of lung, we can see that the carbon dioxide content in the blood is 48%. That means that the carbon dioxide content has decreased from 52% that is present at the level of tissues to 48% that is present at the level of lung. This represents that we have 4% loss of carbon dioxide, that is double, that is amount of carbon dioxide which is released from the blood into the lungs. And this is so because the carbon dioxide dissociation curve has shifted to the right side and causes the lowering of this carbon dioxide dissociation curve in the presence of increased oxygen saturation. Now we consider a situation if there is no shift of this curve and there is no Haldane effect. What will happen? The release of carbon dioxide at the level of partial pressure of 40 at the level of lung will be only 50%. That means there would be a loss of only 2% of carbon dioxide, that is 52 minus 50, that we have 2% volume loss of carbon dioxide. This tell us about the significance of the Haldane effect, that because of this Haldane effect approximately double the amount of carbon dioxide is released from the blood in the lung and approximately doubles the pickup of carbon dioxide in the tissue. This is the significance of the Haldane effect. The combination of oxygen with hemoglobin in the lungs will cause hemoglobin to become a stronger acid, and this will cause displacement of carbon dioxide from the alveoli in two manner. First is the hemoglobin will become more acidic and therefore it will have less tendency to combine with carbon dioxide to form carb-amino hemoglobin. as a result of which much more of carbon dioxide will be displaced from the blood into the alveoli. The second is increased acidity of hemoglobin will also cause it to release excess of hydrogen ion. These hydrogen ion will bind with bicarbonate to form carbonic acid and then dissociating into water and carbon dioxide, and finally there will be a release of carbon dioxide from the blood into the alveoli. Now if we compare the Bohr effect and the Haldane effect, Bohr effect we know it is because of the increased carbon dioxide there is a decreased affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen. It is seen at the level of tissues where there is shifting of oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve to the right side, and there is release of oxygen at the level of tissues. Then we have this Haldane effect. This is the effect when there is an increased oxygen as seen in alveoli. There is a decreased affinity of hemoglobin to bind with carbon dioxide, and because of which there is release of carbon dioxide from the blood into the alveoli. So both these effects are reversed. One, Bohr is occurring at the level of tissue, and Haldane is occurring at the level of pulmonary capillary and the alveoli. This is the study material for today's class.